Dr. Johnson, and we are going to be covering two counseling topics. The first one will be your expertise is challenged, and then the second is going to be respecting time boundaries. Have you ever wondered what to do if a client is going to challenge your expertise? I always love this because anytime we're out in society, you've probably experienced this yourself, where when people find out what you're doing in studying nutrition, they always want to ask you questions. Sometimes the information you provide to them is well received, and then other times you can tell that they don't want to listen. In those times, remember that sometimes silence is the best answer. So why would a client challenge your expertise? It's often a subjective experience. Most of the time, people are walking around with huge nutrition misconceptions from the media, maybe from some personal choices, or even from family members. So how do we respond if we're giving education in a counseling session, or maybe even doing a presentation, and people are questioning your expertise and kind of saying that you're wrong? First of all, we need to not be defensive. So we don't want to come back and say, I'm a dietitian, I know what I'm talking about. We want to try to understand the client's perspective. Maybe why do they believe that their particular way of eating is the best? And then we definitely want to address those clients' concerns. Sometimes that does mean parting ways, and that's a conversation that's hard to have, but definitely necessary for your emotional health. So when your expertise is challenged, I want to have a question here, and I want you to pause and determine how would you respond. So if a client says, look, I don't know if you can help me. You seem awfully young. Are you even old enough to be a dietitian? They're insinuating that you don't know what you're doing because you don't have enough experience. How might you respond as a counselor? I'm going to show you two examples of how you might respond. Yes, I am often told that. Now, how can I help you? What do you think about that response? Here's an alternative. I hear that you have doubts whether I can help you. Can you tell me what it is your intended outcome of these sessions are? I will be happy to tell you whether or not I think I can address your concerns. Take a moment to think about what are the differences between these two responses. Again, the second one is going to be the more optimal response because you're not coming off defensive. You're letting them know that you are going to assess whether or not you have the expertise and kind of reinforcing the fact that you are the expert, but understanding that you're trying to gain their perspective at the same time. Just remember, we don't want to come off defensive, and we always want to try to understand where the client is coming from as we move forward, and sometimes parting ways is the best for both people in the party. How about this example? If a client said, you don't know what you're talking about, how might you respond? Go ahead and pause and think about how you might respond to this. Typically, I would have you discuss with your partner, but since we're on an online platform, you can discuss with yourself. A couple of options. I hear that you don't feel helped, or it sounds like you aren't getting what you need from me. These two responses are open, they're not defensive, and it does allow for the conversation to continue for you to determine if you can continue working with this client or if you need to part ways. Moving on to time boundaries, we want to make sure that we're good at time management during a counseling session. As some of you experienced in that initial counseling session, you realize that maybe 1, the time went too fast, or 2, the time went too slow. Once you get more of a routine down, you're definitely able to have better time management during counseling sessions. However, sometimes we have to help our clients stay on track and navigate back to the conversation. So some time boundaries. What we repeatedly do. So then excellence is not an act, but it's a habit. So as you continue to practice these counseling sessions, and then once you get into practice, you'll be able to manage the time of a counseling session much more effectively than you currently can. So why are time limits important? There's several reasons. First of all, if you have a booked schedule and you have clients blocked in the next session, you need to make sure that you're respectful of the client who's coming in. A second reason that time limits are important is because you can get burnt out as a counselor if all you're doing is seeing client after client after client and not building in space to hopefully write your notes. When I was in practice, I always liked seeing clients every hour, and I would spend anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes with my client, and then the last 15 minutes I was doing their chart note, because if not, I had to wait till the end of the day, and then I would forget what conversations I had with which clients. And then again, people are paying for your time, so we want to respect the client, but also you want to respect your own time. And if you're charging someone for an hour session, but you're giving them an hour and a half of your time, that's something that we need to be mindful about, and you need to value your own time as a counselor. So how can we ease and implement any type of time boundaries within sessions? We first want to set expectations. We also want to have a visible clock in a counseling space. However, we don't want to stare at that clock the entire time. So it should easily be an eye view without it being something where you have to turn around and distract your focused attention on your client. We also want to mention time intervals, such as, Mr. Smith, we're about halfway through our counseling session. I would like to transition to this topic. Or, Mrs. Smith, I have about 10 minutes left of our counseling session. I would like you to share with me how you want to spend the rest of our time together. And then make notes of where you left off. This is important when you're seeing a client more frequently or even less frequently, because you don't want to address anything that you previously went over because time is valuable. This is when referring to your notes becomes a very helpful thing, because you can pick up with the goals that you previously set to then help each other guide the second counseling session or any other follow-up counseling session. What I want you to do right now is I want you to practice time boundaries. So take a moment to practice teaching someone about foods for heart health and then tips for losing weight. And I want you to time yourself for 30 seconds and see if you're able to accomplish educating somebody in a 30-second window on foods for heart health or tips for losing weight. So in this counseling session, in this micro lecture, we basically covered how we can set time boundaries and then as well as what to do when a client challenges our expertise. I hope you're able to implement these in future experiences.